Hi everyone, so today we're going to be having a look at how to plan and answer an extended response 8-mark question on a classic study. And I've chosen the social psychology approach in particular, and we're going to be having a look at the contemporary study by Berger. And just a quick reminder before we start looking at some questions of the assessment objectives in psychology. So remember, AO1 is description of a study or a theory. So they're assessing your knowledge of the study or the theory. So it's factual information. AO2 is application. So it's your ability to apply psychological theories and your knowledge to explain a scenario or a situation that's given to you. And AO3 is evaluation, so you giving your strengths and weaknesses and critically evaluating the study or the theory. So the exam question I have chosen is from a past paper. So we'll have a look at the question, break it down, and have a look at the plan as well. Evaluate one contemporary study from social psychology that has been used to explain human social behaviour for 8 marks. Now, note that it doesn't list the name of the specific study in the question. This is because the spec gives you the option of choosing a study for contemporary. Okay, so what this question, in other words, is asking you to do is to describe and evaluate. Even though it only says evaluate, there are still AO1 descriptive marks available in this question. So always remember that. Okay, so I've produced a brief plan and I've given you this time some starter sentences to just get you started, okay, and to give you a little bit of a structure. So let's have a look at the description side first, and then I'll have a look at the evaluation. So firstly, the description will start off with the aim. So the aim of the study was, okay, this is how you would start off. Okay, now Berger obviously wanted to replicate Milgram's study of obedience. And he wanted to obviously see if the findings of Milgram's study would still apply in 2019. So he wanted to see if participants would behave in the same way. Your sample of participants is really important for you to include information such as this, and often people do miss out information about sample size. Okay, so talk about sample size, how many participants were used. Okay, obviously the sample consisted of 70 adults, which were volunteer sample. They had a range of males and females used in the sample. So you do need to include also from different backgrounds, from different cultures. So we had Black Afro-American people, we had white people in the sample, and also Caucasian people. So this kind of information is really important, and you will get your AO1 descriptive marks by giving information such as this. Thirdly, the study was conducted in a laboratory experiment, okay, using an independent measures design. So this is important to include because, you know, your examiner wants to see whether you know where the study was conducted as well. And obviously going on to the fact that it was a replication of Milgram's study. So you briefly describe what obviously Milgram did and how it was a replication of Milgram's study, including the next point, which is giving the electric shocks to participants if they got one of the word pairs wrong. So you're almost like describing Milgram's study, but not in as much detail because it was obviously a replication. So your description of the study needs to be quite detailed, making sure obviously the examiner has all the information about the study. Okay, so remember for AO1, you are trying to show evidence for your knowledge. So make sure you include all of the specific information here. Going on to evaluation, AO3 for 4 marks. This is where you need to add a little bit more detail and elaborate a little bit more on your marks, okay? So starting off, I've given you again some starting sentences. So the sample was generalizable because it contained 70 adults from a range of backgrounds and different age groups as well. However, there was one of the weaknesses of the sample was 38% of those volunteers were actually deselected in order to exclude anyone that might have found the study particularly distressing, or they may have obviously studied Milgram. So the sample itself, although it was generalizable on one hand, there are sort of weaknesses of it as well. Secondly, a laboratory experiment can be seen as, so obviously using a laboratory experiment is one of the most reliable methods in psychology, purely because it allows us to have control of the variables, and so it's easy to replicate and therefore it's reliable. However, you can also comment on the fact that lab experiments do lack ecological validity. And what that means is because they're carried out in an artificial environment for the participant's behavior is not going to be natural. So it's a question of validity, so ecological validity. Also, the study was more ethical than Milgram's study, and you need to obviously explain why this was. For example, Berger used a mild shock 15 volts, whereas Milgram used 45 volt shock to show as an example to participants. So there was a range of different ways that Berger made sure that his study was more ethical than Milgram's study. And finally, he also used a clinical psychologist that was present in the study, and obviously this made it more ethical because they were obviously supervising all the trials, and they were obviously told to end the trials immediately if any of the participants did suffer from any distress in the experiment. Okay, so these are just some of the points. There's a lot more points that you can include in your description and evaluation. Okay, but this plan is just to give you an idea of the kind of information to include in an 8-mark question. Okay, so just remember one thing really, make sure you elaborate and explain your points in detail. Okay, because a lot of students will make the point but won't elaborate on that point, therefore they won't get the marks. Okay, so remember your AO3 obviously require a bit more detail than your AO1.